opportunity to have many meetings with him and the Swiss Press Club. So thanks again, Mr. Zannier, to give us the chance to meet you and to hear you about the important topics important issues you are dealing with at the OSCE about Ukraine, Central Asia security, and what we have called with Natasha uh, new transnational challenges as migration and so on. Because OSCE is pretty known, but not everybody knows exactly what are the perimeter of your responsibility. So thanks again. And before to give you the floor, I would like to ask you to sign our golden book.
Pleasure.
And I give you a little Swiss souvenir, a little Swiss knife.
Okay.
Yes,
Oh, you're giving me a problem to carry it.
this one is a strong one, yes.
Okay, okay, thank you very much.
Just
Yeah, well.
Okay, merci. Please.
So, okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity for an encounter and a chat with the press here. I'm here just for the day for this important event at the UN on combating, on countering violent extremism, but this is an opportunity also being in Geneva to set out a little bit the perception of where we stand in general on affairs related to European security, seen from the perspective of the agenda of the OSCE. Let me say, first of all, the OSCE has, in a way, seen its role increasing in recent years because of the growing divisions in Europe. And this is, in a sense, an unfortunate situation, but it's what we see in front of our eyes. We see dividing lines re-emerging in Europe. We see confrontation. The tones of the debate in the Hofburg in Vienna sometimes remind us of some of the tones that we heard during the time of the Cold War. But of course we are not in a Cold War situation. We are perhaps in an even more complex situation though. Conflict has re-emerged in Europe. We are, I would say, at this moment, seeing as a central issue on the agenda of the OSCE the Ukrainian issue. In particular, the crisis in around the Ukraine, the conflict in Donbass is absorbing a lot of our energies, both at the political level in supporting the negotiation process under the support of the Normandy group through a trilateral contact group where we're now discussing a number of issues from the organization of the elections in Donbass to additional steps to disengage on the ground. The situation now is not good. Yesterday was perhaps the worst day we have seen in months in terms of exchanges of fire across the lines. The lines have come closer. The number of incidents has increased. Sometimes it feels a bit artificial even to talk about violation of the ceasefire because those violations are so systematic that it looks like the conflict is about to restart. So it is a moment when there is a need for an additional effort to try to stabilize the situation. That is a precondition for everything else. And then, of course, We want to see exchange of all prisoners. We need to really to take seriously the problems of the population on the ground. We had a few emergencies in recent weeks. At some point, the system that is delivering water to a large part of the Donetsk city had been disrupted as a result of the shelling. We managed to broker a ceasefire, we managed to bring in the technicians, we had it fixed, but people were without water for a number of days. We tried to facilitate the re-entry in the occupied, zones, pardon? No, in the zones held by the rebels, of a number of returnees that wanted to return to their houses from Ukraine, and they went halfway through between the lines, and then they got stranded in this no man's land because there was in this case the Luhansk separatists blocked them. They were saying that there were landmines around, and these people, and many old people, they were there on foot, and they were really trying to go through. We had to go in with our vehicles, rescue them, bring them back to the buses, and try to move them to some other checkpoint so that they could try to go in. And there are recurrent episodes of this kind. So the humanitarian situation is a concern. And talking to the people, we see that many of them really have had enough, and they expect also us to help them restore stability and restore conditions for normal life. So Ukraine is a concern. There are people who die every day as a result of the shelling. We have seen some of the heavy weapons that have been moved away. Up to 30% of the weapons that had been put in storage areas far from the contact line have been repositioned closer to the contact line. So the trends are worrying in terms of the dynamics on the ground in Ukraine, and this is why there is a need for additional efforts. In all this now, in recent days, our life has become a bit more complicated because of the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. You will have seen also the events there. That's another old wound. There is a political process that followed the conflict at the beginning of the 90s, where, however, the two sides have been so entrenched. We have a system of facilitation and mediation to try to find a solution, but at the end of the day, the solution is in the hands of the sides. So we can't really impose a solution as the international community. We have a very strong mechanism. We have a system of co-chairs. The co-chairs are the United States, Russia, and France as a EU country. But even these very influential players didn't manage so far to find a solution. Tensions have accumulated over the last year. We have seen also there an increase in the number of the violations of the ceasefire along the line of contact. We have seen an increasing number of casualties. We've seen increasingly sophisticated weapons appearing, and suddenly these incidents have now evolved into a proper military operation. We have seen the Azerbaijani forces occupying some territory or taking over some territory of the so-called occupied territories. These were Azeri territories, Azerbaijani territories that were occupied by the Karabakh side around Nagorno-Karabakh itself. And some of these now seem to have been taken over. We're sending our special representative there to look at the situation on the ground. We managed, or the three co-chairs who are now in the region, managed to broker a ceasefire. Of course, it's the co-chairs themselves, but it's also the countries they represent. They're very active, in particular in this phase, the United States, but especially Russia, is very actively engaging with the leadership, both in Armenia and Azerbaijan. So we hope that this will result into a breakthrough, also the political process. It is obvious that the solution has to be political, and there is, how can I say, no way that this can be resolved militarily, and we don't want to see more victims and casualties. So these are aspects, if you want, of the return to geopolitics on the agenda of the organization, the divisions, and we see different camps. There are sanctions on Russia, following also the annexation of Crimea. But the agenda of the organization is complex in many other ways. There is still a lot of unfinished work in the Western Balkan. And we mentioned also Central Asia in the title of this as an area where there is a need for a stronger engagement for the international community. Afghanistan is still in need of a lot of support, and Afghanistan has a decisive role. If Afghanistan remains stable and develops well, it will be a factor of stability for the entire region. But if it doesn't, then it will remain a factor of instability for the entire region. And we see also in that region signs that are of developments that are of concern. Terrorism is becoming an issue. Violent extremism, topic of the conference here. We've seen the issue of foreign fighters that we have seen in many places. That exists very much also in the Central Asian countries. And they themselves, I think, were surprised to see the numbers of nationals from their own countries joining ISIL and fighting with the Islamic radical forces. So that's something that needs to be also addressed, also in that region. And I'm not saying that this region has a special, in fact, if you look at the problems we have in Belgium or in Paris or potentially in the UK, and the numbers of fighters from there, we see that this is a problem that affects everybody. And this leads also to a transition to another part of the agenda of the organization, which is the global challenges. And as we see the terrorist attacks and all that, and what we see in the OSCE is that in spite of the divisions of geopolitics, when it comes to addressing global challenges, we find a common interest to sit down and work together across the lines in a way. And we adopted a few weeks ago a decision on cybersecurity, for instance, and a result of a working group chaired by the American ambassador, where the Russians were participating, where everybody agreed on a set of measures for the countries of the organization to adopt in case of cyber attacks, to build confidence, to exchange information, etc. And in the same vein, now together we are discussing a number of key issues. Terrorism and strengthening the role of the organization in addressing this. Environmental and climatic issues, climate change related issues. Of course, looking at the implications of this for security. And now migration, we had a big event in Rome discussing migration, trying to understand what is happening and then trying to fine tune the response of the organization to that. And there is a working group meeting in these days chaired by the Swiss ambassador in Vienna and Mr. Wild, Ambassador Wild. And this group is really progressing very well. We're really, first of all, we're trying to analyze what's happening, and when we try to tailor some responses. And what we see in all these areas is that a regional organization like the OSCE alone, of course, cannot make a difference. But we see that these are issues that are so large and so difficult and so complex that you really need coalitions. No single country can make a difference. No single organization can make a difference. You need strategies that are very complex and that involve a multiplicity of actors to address the various angles and the various aspects. We are positioning the OSCE as a regional organization under the UN, which is the spirit under which we operate, and like the African Union or ASEAN, etc. We consider ourselves as the European and Euro-Atlantic regional setup to support the UN. And in this sense, we are working very closely with the UN to help implement the global agenda at a regional level, working with our countries to strengthen our ability to have stronger institutions. For instance, we train police, we train border guards, especially for countries that have less capacity, so that they can have a better ability to control. And of course, we do it keeping in mind the agenda of the OSCE, which is a broad agenda where also attention for human rights, for the rule of law is very high. So we try also to give the proper standards of democratic policing, etc. And but at the same time, keeping in mind the fact that we want to see also more effectiveness. We have an MOU, for instance, with Interpol, and we are upgrading it now. We're in discussion on upgrading it now, so as to assist countries better. So this is a second part of the agenda of the organization, addressing the global challenges that is growing very fast, and that is keeping us very busy. So I've touched the surface a little bit. I would stop at this, and I will let you come in with questions, and I will try.
Maybe just mention for the new challenges you are facing, as we said about migrations.
Right.
It's a new, a new theme you have to deal with.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what you are also involved in Greece or Turkey, or in which sense?
Not really. In Greece, we'll go to Athens. We've been invited to Athens for an event in May with the former chairman in office of the OSCE, and we will have a discussion there. But what we are trying to do, let's focus on migration for a moment. We brought in our Security Day Jeff Sachs, who is one of the key authors of the Sustainable Development Goals for the United Nations as an advisor to the Secretary General. And he helped us opening up the discussion. And basically one of the things that we have seen is that what we see today is a very complex phenomenon, where there is on the one hand the humanitarian emergency, mainly related to Syria, when there is a clear obligation for countries to assist the refugees and for as long as the crisis continues, so that at the same time engaging in addressing the conflict and recreating the conditions for them to be able to go back to their country when the conflict is solved. But then there's a larger picture, and the larger picture is also difficult to describe, but shorthand could be we are starting to see the beginning of a demographic crisis. There is a pressure of population, and this demographic pressure is creating a constant flow towards Europe, because Europe obviously is not growing demographically as other regions do. Then within that, you have all sorts of other aspects. You have the impact of organized crime and people smuggling, because they make lots of money through pushing. So that needs to be fought against. There are the economic differentials. So we need to invest more and more strategically in development support to help countries outside Europe develop. There is the security angle of the terrorists. There are groups who have interests in channeling towards Europe, especially when it comes to, how can I say, groups that have an agenda that is not necessarily friendly, if you want, and they try to use the stream to infiltrate it and to affect also even the composition of the ethnic composition in European countries. So that we have heard statements of this regard. So there are lots of agendas that need to be brought out and addressed, each of them in its own merit. And this is why it's making it very difficult. And overall, what you need is a policy where, of course, I don't want to preempt the conclusions because the work is on hand, but my feeling is that we would need a combination of policies where, on the one hand, there is protection. So those who say we need to build walls, in a sense, this is not totally wrong. We need a policy that includes filters, and where these walls should have doors, and the doors should be well guarded, and we should be able to bring in all the people who need assistance and help them. But then we need also a policy that helps us regulate these flows, and this policy, however, cannot be only focused on the regulation. It must also be focused on addressing the problems outside, and so the development first of all, and also the security aspects and fighting terrorism and fighting the traffickers and all that.
Okay. Thanks. I don't know if there is a question or.
Oui, allez-y, oui, ça va, oui, c'est pas grave.
Monsieur Zannier, monsieur le secrétaire général, donc vous savez, avec 4 avril, on attend des élections en Serbie. En même temps, la Serbie elle va organiser aussi des élections au Kosovo. Les Kosovars ne sont pas contents du tout que c'est une étape. Est-ce que ces élections au Kosovo, elles sont illégales ou bien légales? Quelle est la position des OSCE dans cette domaine?
Disons, les citoyens serbes qui veulent voter dans les élections en Serbie ont le droit de le faire. Donc, ce que je peux faire, c'est de faciliter les opérations. Et donc, on peut utiliser, comme on l'a fait dans le passé, on peut utiliser la présence internationale, la présence de l'OSCE, par exemple, dans la région, pour faciliter le transfert des votes des citoyens serbes qui veulent voter en Serbie et les transférer en Serbie, de façon qu'ils puissent avoir exercé leur droit de voter dans les élections. C'est aussi simple que ça, je pense.
Mais vous savez, il y a une minorité en Serbie, presse-Geneva. Eux, ils veulent boycotter les élections en Serbie. Ils attendent des élections au Kosovo. Ce genre, cette minorité, est-ce qu'ils ont le droit de participer aux élections au Kosovo? Si le Serbe, il accepte de participer aux élections en Serbie, dans le nord de Mitrovica.
Oui.
Aussi les Albanais, eux, au Kosovo.
Oui, mais là, je ne peux pas résoudre le problème pour vous. C'est entre les autorités de Pristina et la Serbie que les choses doivent être discutées. Le gouvernement de Belgrade, je ne peux pas vous offrir une solution. Moi, je suis prêt à aider, voilà, techniquement, à donner le soutien qui peut être donné, mais les ententes doivent être prises entre Pristina et Belgrade. Et peut-être l'Union européenne peut aider, comme ils l'ont fait dans beaucoup d'occasions.
Hi. You said that the situation in Donbass is not good these last days. Do you think that there is still hope for the full implementation of the Minsk agreement in the near future? And what is your opinion on the possibility of deployment of international peacekeepers, maybe UN peacekeepers?
Yeah. As to the hope, I think Minsk is the plan we have, and we have to make it work. It's not easy, and we are finding obstacles from all sides, but we're pushing, and we're engaging. We are very proactive, also coming up with ideas, with proposals, suggestions, and we have a very intense schedule of meetings also to keep all sides engaged. And we have seen some progress. It has been very difficult, but we have seen some progress. And we will keep pushing for this progress because we think that's the best option that we have is really to go ahead there. And sorry, the second part of the question was the peacekeepers. On the UN, I can't really pass a judgment if the Security Council decides to deploy a peacekeeping operation. It's absolutely fine, and it's their legitimate decision. But for the time being, the only space we have found is us, and so for our presence. So I think we should build on what we have. We are internally thinking if there are, for instance, elections in Donbass. We are thinking of various options also perhaps to strengthen our presence there. We would be ready to bring in observers for those elections from ODIHR, from our office in Warsaw. And, but we need to make sure that there is a safe environment. The safe environment, by the way, is not only for the observers, but it's also for the voters. Because if we want to have serious elections, we need to have really a ceasefire that holds. You can't have elections if there is constant shelling, of course. So we need to have a proper, safe environment for everybody, and we are ready to invest more in helping consolidate this environment. That would be a significant step forward, of course, if we manage to get to that point. It's not easy, but we're working on it.
Thank you. Maybe another remark, as you have a long experience in security in Europe, you were working since, I don't know, but since a long time there, and you mentioned the change of geopolitical situation in Europe. So what is your perception? Because you don't like to speak about a new Cold War, but all the media speak about that, or it's the main idea or the main, the main name for that. So what are the reasons? It's because Russia is very criticized, but on the other hand, if you look, the NATO has only put forward, so just under the nose of Russia. So how can we explain this kind of this shift in geopolitical and just to understand the context?
Yeah, there are obviously many reasons for this. But certainly what we have seen is Russia progressively reacting to, how can I say, in a confrontational way, to steps taken by European and Euro-Atlantic institutions to engage with countries in the Russian neighborhood without, how can I say, without having or in the absence, I would say, of a proper discussion of these issues with Russia. And of course, the Western institutions feel that it's their decision and the decision of the countries concerned. Whereas Russia feels that in its neighborhood, it has stakes. There are, for one, Russian citizens living in many of the countries around Russia, and Russia feels it has a responsibility towards them, but it also feels it needs how can I say, a security space or a security environment which is somehow been undermined by these developments. So this has accumulated over time, but hasn't been too visible, even though in the OSCE it was in some ways visible through these, what we used to call the frozen conflicts, and then whether it was Moldova or Georgia, and for many years this was there, and it was always interpreted as a local problem. But in fact it was a symptom of a larger issue that has, with Ukraine, has really exploded in a way. And this has led to, but the only way, to my mind, and certainly with the OSCE method in mind, if you want, the only way forward is a constructive engagement. A constructive engagement that is made difficult by some of the steps that, and the things that we have seen happening over the last couple of years, including Crimea, now Donbass, and all that, and the sanctions. So this is making the job of those who try to create the conditions for the engagement much more difficult in a way. And there is still war drums in the background, and of course that doesn't help. So to change the mindset at this moment is very difficult, but I think we should still invest in trying to do that. Without, however, compromising the principles and the rules that govern our relations, and that's also part of the challenge.
And your main message to the conference about violent extremism, will you announce or will you insist of.
Yeah, there will be a few things. First of all, we will take stock of what is happening, and all these terrorist attacks. Unfortunately, these are a sign of a problem that is not going to be away fast. So we have a problem in our societies, and sometimes we focus too much on what's happening in Syria, what's happening, and we don't look enough at what's happening inside our own societies. So we need to invest more in what we do. Work on education, try to work on more social integration and this kind of things. And the migration debate is relevant, of course, in this context. And then we need to take also practical steps. In the OSCE, we have a number of initiatives that we'll also present there, including training young people on use of social media and warn them of the risk of radicalization with the social media, so that we develop also counter-radicalization strategy. And we do this on the ground with many countries involving civil society and all that. The OSCE is good for doing this kind of things. And but all this comes under the heading of a campaign that we have recently launched, and actually I could present it here. And this is a campaign open to everybody, and it would be good also journalists and media could embrace it. And it's called United on Encountering Violent Extremism. And we will present it also here, and it's going to be the label, if you want, because I think we need also to raise our voices. We want to see when there is also a religious angle of it. We want to see also Islamic communities engaging it. We have a number of Mediterranean partners, Mediterranean countries, Arab countries that are partners of the OSCE. We're working with them on these issues. We will have soon an event in Tunisia on this with young people, with the civil society, and under the OSCE. So we are exporting also in other countries this, and in Arab countries this, because it's important that they respond and they are heard in this context, and they are interested, of course.
Okay, thanks. Don't know if there is another intervention or question or remark or statement. Okay. Good.
Well, thank you very much.
In this sense, good luck, and happy to have you here. And,
thank you for this opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just ask for a favor? Actually, those of you who are here and could stay maybe for 5-10 minutes, we would really very much appreciate if you participate